a lot to unpack, a lot of activity going on back and forth. You know, Trump, as I said, Trump said he had reached some kind of framework of a future deal with the NATO head, but the Danish government says, no, 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 it's not up to you and NATO, it's up to us and the people of Greenland, and sovereignty is non-negotiable. Let me go to Michele. What exactly is going on here?
It's a very complicated matter, and we need to remember basically European countries have lost the Second World War, most of them, not all, and the US has won. So over the last 80 years, the relationship between US and the European countries has been one of, let's say, covered under the name of being allied. In reality, it's been a relationship of a superior military and economic power, the US, and weaker military and economic countries in Europe. So, over the last few years, many politicians in Europe have kept on this narrative of Italy, France, Germany being allied with the United States. And this is not true. We were a junior partner in a relationship. US has military bases in Italy, in Germany. Germany and Italy have no military bases.
So what is happening now between
the relationship?
What is happening now between the United States and its junior partners, Michele?
It's happening that finally we discover. Remember, discover is a word very interesting because before it was covered, and now we discover something that has always been true. We have always been junior partner. What Trump is doing now is instead of pretending that the US is acting on moral grounds to export democracy, to distribute his wealth and welfare around the world. Now, finally, Trump at least is being honest, and he's saying, you know what? I capture a leader of a foreign country in Venezuela because of the oil. I want to conquer Greenland, which is part of a European country, because of my strategic interest in the Arctic. And finally, he has come out to tell the truth. Unfortunately, European politicians have been telling the citizen that they were allied of the United States. So now they find it difficult to accept the situation. And unfortunately, almost kind of being in a tunnel vision, they continue to try to make sense of this new Trump thing, which is really not true. The reality has not changed. What has changed in the United States is to be a little bit more open about this relationship between US and its junior partner. Very, very hard for European politicians to accept.
Anna, what's your take observing things from this end of the world?
Yeah, I think Trump is very much interested in Greenland, not necessarily only about because of the fact that it has what you call rare earth or strategic resources, but I think it's more about strategic or it's more about its strategic interests in the Arctic. But when you talk about the reality, when you talk about realization, if the Trump's claim that the U.S. should get Greenland, I don't think it is. It is not realistic at the moment, especially in the way Trump is framing it. Because Greenland is a self-governing territory of Denmark, and any transfer of ownership would require the consent, of course, of not only of Denmark, but even the Greenlanders, but of course of the whole Europe. As you can see right now, the whole Europe are reacting to all of this bravado that Trump is showing, has been speaking about. So this is not a real estate transaction as far as Europe is concerned. It is always a question of self-determination under international law. And of course, under international law, a state like the United States cannot just say like, I want Greenland, I want it now. But I think Trump, speaking in Davos, and even all of this pronouncement of Trump is more symbolic and rhetorical, aim at, I think, at projecting power and signaling Arctic competition, not legally, or which is not legally possible or politically a viable policy as far as the United States is concerned. But there are purposes why Trump is doing this. And I think one of that is domestic optics or domestic politics. Trump is
Okay.
trying to project to the
My
United
question really,
Nations.
yeah, I'm really, of course, he's doing this for domestic optics, for, votes, for getting
Yeah.
reelected down the line. But here, what do you see is the fundamental issue here between President Trump and his European counterparts? What is happening between them?
What is happening between them at the moment is there is a disagreement. Hello?
Yeah,
Sorry.
I'm hearing you.
There is a disagreement between the United States European partners and alliance. As you can see, there's a rift in the alliance, and you can also see that the European leaders, or Europe as a whole, is united against this claim of Trump that it has some kind of rights in owning or taking Greenland, and you can see the rift. And I
Okay.
think this is one thing good that we can see, because Europe is standing up. It doesn't mean that Europe will, break away from the United States in terms of NATO alliance, but you can see that Europe is standing up to the United States and saying, no, this is not possible, or
Okay.
we will not allow this.
Mr. Liu here in the studio, yeah, you've been listening to all of that. Do you think that is the point here? The European leaders standing up saying no to the United States, but no, if you agree, no to what exactly?
Actually, beyond what we see now, what's happening in Davos, we have to see in a wider thing. Actually, there is a long-standing mythology saying that there is no war between democracies. There is not mentioned close treaty allies. So now we are seeing the rift, rupture, or even conflict between the treaty allies. That's the question.
Is that also the main difference between this particular rift versus the disagreement between European leaders and American president over other issues, for instance, Ukraine, for instance, Maduro, for instance, Iran, Syria? Because right now we're seeing for the European leaders, the Greenland issue is a huge thing. Is that the biggest difference here?
Right. It's a big difference, because if the United States threatens to take military actions to either Venezuela or Iran, they say, okay, it's because it's between different systems. It's between the free world and the tyranny. But now it's between the same democratic countries, between the treaty allies. That's the point. So now we can see at last, eventually Mr. Trump backed down, but his backing down was tactical. It's because at this moment he had to make a compromise. But if he wanted to do it, he could. Remember, he could. He has the military power to take Greenland at any time, and Europe is not able to resist that. So the question now is that we see the U.S.-led coalition is witnessing a rupture, and in the future it could be a collapse.
You mentioned the word rupture, which is also one of the key phrase or catchphrase coming out of Davos, because Prime Minister Mark Carney of Canada used this word in his speech, which received a standing ovation. He said the US-led international order is facing a rupture rather than a transition, and he called for power for the powerless. When he talked about powerless, he was talking about the so-called middle powers, countries such as European countries, such as Canada, basically what Liu Xiang was talking about, the second world, if we can use this term. Is that true? So, Michele, how do you look at this? If it is a rupture, is that very much the same thing with what European leaders are discovering vis-a-vis their relationship with President Trump being, a junior partner? Is that the definition of the rupture, or is there something larger, more fundamental happening?
I think it's a little bit more fundamental. The key thing is that for the first time in history, the United States is declining in power because of the rise of China and the global south, etc. The United States see economic dominance and the military dominance, hegemony, to have to walk hand in hand. They see one as necessary for the other one. So the main goal of the United States of the last few years has been to break up the relationship between its vassal states, the European states, with China, with Russia, and with little bit Middle East. They have tried with China in the last 10 years via sanctions, embargo of technology, and have realized that this tactic has failed because China, if you cannot buy technology, if you have embargo on import of goods, Nvidia, semiconductors, what do? You invest and you accelerate the development of your own technologies. So they've realized now that China has succeeded in responding quite well to this attempt by the United States to contain China development. Then, of course, we had the Ukrainian war. Ukrainian war is not by chance. If you look at the Black Sea, the United States wants NATO membership around the Black Sea. Of course, we have European countries like Romania, then we have Turkey, and it's not by chance that the two dangerous areas are Ukraine and Georgia, two other countries that also face the Black Sea, so that they contain the Russia access to the Black Sea. And of course, with the sanctions against Russia that have failed over the last 3 years, the United States has also attempted to break up the relationship between Russia and Europe, a relationship that was very healthy. Russia has never done anything to Italy, to my country.
Let me ask you this, Michele. Let me ask you this. Now that you mentioned Russia,
that was a long time back.
Yeah, sorry. Now that you mentioned Russia, it's interesting. While European leaders in Davos or in other occasions have come to realize that the relationship between Washington and European capitals are not equal. It's a different thing than they thought. But on the other hand, or they're calling for a new world order. But on the other hand, they still keep the ideological difference or their old perception towards, for instance, Russia or towards China or towards Chinese investment. This haphazard awakening, do you think that's going to make a difference, Michele?
It's going to make a difference, and Mark Carney is surprisingly opening up the way for this relationship. What Mark Carney is doing is very simple. He has understood that the competitors and the threats sometimes come from neighbors, not from faraway countries. And in his case, the danger and the threat comes from his southern cousin, the United States, and has decided very simply, very pragmatic, realpolitik, to say to the Chinese leadership, listen, we buy more of your electric vehicles that we want, that we need, and then you open up a little bit of your market to our agricultural product. And if you want, I tell you what's going to happen next. Canada will invite China to invest in the development of semiconductor technology and some infrastructure development in Canada. All activities that are not sensitive in a way, because China is not going to do, let's say, predatory acquisition of existing Canadian company. It's just simply going to develop new activities where there was just land and trees and lakes before. And at the same time, Canada is now doing a double game, is trying to help its own economy by having this new access to the Chinese market, but also putting Carney at the head of this new movement of small powers that can actually
middle powers
try to get together and form an alternative bloc to the U.S. hegemony.
All right, that's very interesting. Let me bring in Klaus Larres, Professor of History and International Affairs at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I want to ask you the same question, Professor Larres. What fundamentally is going on between the United States and European leaders at this moment? Is this a rupture, something that's much more consequential, or is it just a hiccup?
Well, thank you for having me, and I apologize for the bad connection. No, it is more than a hiccup. It is clearly a rupture. How long-lasting that rupture will be, that remains to be seen. But the Europeans eventually have stood up to Trump. They believe that it was now going to the fundamentals of the European understanding of sovereignty and their independence, and they thought it was outrageous that Trump wanted to purchase or even militarily invade Greenland, an autonomous territory of the Kingdom of Denmark. And that was really, the last straw which broke the camel's back. That was going too far. And the European countries all rallied together. The European Commission supported them, of course, strongly. And they really put up a united stand against Trump. So it clearly is more than a hiccup. It is a rupture. But how long that rupture will last has to be seen, because we know that NATO Secretary General Rupture had a good talk with Trump. They agreed apparently on some framework agreement, and that resolved the issue. What exactly is in that framework agreement, we don't know, but we know for sure that Greenland will not be handed over to the United States.
Well, again, I believe Greenland is a symptom, is an illustration of the underlying problems. Let me stay with you, Laras, here. Do you think European leaders have finally woken up and made the mental or psychological flip to say, okay, the world has changed. We are going to deal with the world differently, not just vis-a-vis the United States, but also vis-a-vis China, vis-a-vis other emerging economies, the BRIC countries. They're talking the talk. But at the same time, we're still seeing this zero-sum policies or announcement, for instance, labeling Chinese companies as high risk in certain sectors. Do you think they are finally ready, or they're finally seeing the picture with clarity?
Well, what is certainly clear is that they have understood what Trump stands for, that Trump wants more and even wants to have the sovereignty over a European country, and they have stood up against that. But that does not necessarily mean that they now turn towards other countries and be soft toward other countries. I think they will stop being soft towards the United States. They will stop being really giving in to Trump, but they then have to look around the world and see which countries or which dealings with which countries will be advantageous, which will not be advantageous. So being against Trump, standing up to Trump, does not automatically mean they will now be extremely friendly to China or India or other countries. That depends on a case-by-case basis, what is in it for the Europeans. The Europeans have perhaps now recognized their own national interests much more strongly than before the Greenland affair, but they, of course, have to look critically at other countries too.
Yeah. Professor Laras, I want to take this opportunity to ask you one more question, because this is really personally interesting to me. Sure. Because every time you come on the show, you were a strong defender of the European position on Ukraine. Every time we had a debate, or you with my co-panelists, have you changed your mind slightly in any way since what happened with President Trump on the Ukrainian issue?
Not really, but what we all like is to see an end of the war in Ukraine. But the conditions need to be right. Ukraine should not be asked to sacrifice its sovereign territory. Some sort of compromise with Russia needs to be found. And Witkoff and Kushner are doing their best, I assume, to find that compromise. But so far, I can't see that a compromise which all parties, including Zelensky and Putin, have agreed to and has been found. Ukraine needs to maintain its sovereignty and independence. And I think that is what it is all about. Right. And I think the European countries still believe that and support Ukraine in that way.
Thank you, Professor Laras. Thank you very much. Let me turn back to Anna, whether you share my impression that it seems the importance of Ukraine is not as high as the importance of Greenland for European leaders.
I think from the way I see it, the European leaders and even Europe, especially the western side of Europe, is looking at these two issues differently and having a different stand. I think European leaders would still be standing on its position that They will still be supporting Ukraine, may it be politically or militarily speaking. But when you talk about Greenland, I think that's a different issue, because this is now you're talking about sovereignty of a European state, even though Greenland is under Denmark. But this is a different thing, and also it's not just about economic. This is more about strategic, and we talk about sovereignty. And when you talk about sovereignty issue, I think the Europeans has a big stake on it. And this is one thing, and also one thing that you have to remember in the speeches of in Davos, one specific word or phrase that emerged strongly is what you call strategic autonomy. So meaning, the European leaders and Europe as a whole, even is united in asserting that, yeah, we can be allied in the framework of NATO, but and take note, we also want to have this strategic autonomy, especially now that Trump is very much eager to acquire Greenland, may it be. But of course, Trump said that he will not use force, but he really is intending to have Greenland by buying it or whatsoever. So this is very interesting. But again, I don't see a similar stand when you talk about the Ukraine crisis. But
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a
Okay,
different
Mr. Liu.
idea, have
Yeah.
a different treatment on it. Yeah.
Mr. Liu, very quickly on that question, but also, if you don't have a strong economy, you cannot have autonomy. And right now, European economy is very bad. is not doing well at all. Is there an opportunity by engaging China?
So Europe now is facing a new stage. Actually, we all of us have seen the rupture here, and I think in the near future, the European leaders, I don't mean the EU leaders, but all members, EU state leaders, they will recognize the importance of the integrity of Euro-Asia continent as a whole. So when people are still talking about Europeans' position towards Ukraine, I'm thinking that based on what's happening here, what's happening now, European leaders might turn their eyes to Russia again. Before the Russia-Ukraine conflict, Germany and other European countries have very close economic relationship with Russia, and successfully, right? That's successful relationship, and Euro-China relations have been widening. So now I think the European leaders will probably turn their eyes to Russia again, and definitely they will turn their eyes to China. So everybody is expecting the visits of the people like German Chancellor and the British Prime Minister coming to China in the near future. So that's a trend.
Okay. Hopefully something positive is going to come out of that. I want to give the final opportunity to Michele, because you are in Rome and you are talking to people who are in it, political leaders, business leaders. What are they saying behind the scene? Does that more or less fit into what we discussed, and where are they looking now?
There is a little bit of a fracture even within the political circles here in Italy, because there are some, let's say, right-wing parties that by ideology they feel forced to support Trump no matter what he says. So they are, of course, in a difficult position, because they also understand that not everything that Trump says is right, but they need to say he's right, or they do not condemn him publicly. And then we have another side of the political spectrum that is much more pragmatic, that is looking at China with interest, is looking back at the Belt and Road. I know this for a fact. They're looking back at closer relationship with Russia to buy again gas from Russia, which I think is what we need to do and must do in the interest of our own economy. Because you see, Liu Xin, the big thing in European politicians is that they think they work for NGOs, and they think they are the, let's say, the paladins of human rights and democracy. No, the role of governments, of leaders, is to do the interest of their own people. If they want to work in an NGO, there are other jobs in Save the Children, Medicine Sans Frontières, etc. And I think we need to go back to this real politics situation. I want to just mention Chancellor, German Chancellor Merz yesterday in Davos. He said something that is completely out of this world. He said that Germany is going to support Denmark and the Nordic country against any threat from Russia. So he's completely not understanding that the threat to Denmark is not from Russia, again, that has done nothing to Denmark or to Italy, but the threat is from the United States. And finally, the Danish government should also get its act together, because this thing, the people within a province can decide their own destiny if they want to belong to Denmark or to the United States is incorrect. Integrity of a sovereign nation it cannot be decided by the people. I know this contradicts some people that say people have the right to decide who they want to belong to, but of course the people of New York cannot vote against separating from the United States. So the Danish government should not let the Inuit in Greenland to decide the way they want to be. It is a decision by the Danish government in Copenhagen. And I think they are also being a bit too weak in asserting their national integrity first, and then internally and not publicly decide what they want to do with a piece of their own land.
Yeah, indeed, it's not easy. If you look at the statements coming out of the Danish government, trying to toe a very delicate line, not to offend anybody they don't want to offend, but not to not say their position. They still have to make their position strong. But then, by trying to do all of that, your message is lost in the way. Let's see. I think it is definitely a very interesting period of time, as a lot of people put it. And let's do the thinking, real hard thinking, what's going to happen and what we can do about it.